DA's office.
I'm Mike Tabor from Indie Media.
Renee Burke, downtown convenience site for PDA. Natasha here, Fulton Police Nurse.
Mike Boyer, ONA Crime Prevention Program.
And I'm going to remind you, I'm sorry, we came into, we're just introducing ourselves.
Hi, my name is Gwen Barnard. I'm from the Church of Scientology.
Welcome. I'm going to remind people to speak up a little too. I noticed a few people were soft-spoken, and I know I'm getting to the age where I need I need a little extra volume there to be able to hear things. So people received the sidewalk data from August attached to your email. I'm sorry I don't have copies of it here for you today. I'm not sure if people have questions or comments they want to make. I know it's kind of hard if we don't have but you have some of it, right? I'm sorry, I'm going to mangle your name.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I've got, I think, what you already have put out, which is August.
Okay.
That's, I don't have anything for September.
Right, we don't
Right.
have September's
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Right. Would you be willing to summarize it for us?
Well,
I do remember being struck by the fact that there were none of them were with horse-mounted patrol.
yeah, I'll do my best here
Thank you.
to summarize. It looks like during the month of August, there was 27 written warnings, 3 citations, and 4 unrelated arrests. Let's see here. It looks like are you wanting like the housing status and all of the different sectors?
Housing status is great, and maybe if there's any locations that have particularly a lot of activity is something we often look at.
Okay. Of the 27 citations, 23, no address was given.
The
for-
warnings, right, 23 warnings.
What's that?
I think you said 23 citations, but it's 23.
Yeah, I'm sorry, of the written warnings, 23 were, had no address given, 4 had an address. And then no shelter addresses or refusal.
Did you notice any age trends? Were there more traveling youth, for example?
I will, yeah, actually, that's, I can jump forward to that if you like. It looks like 18 of the 27, it looks like 18 to 29 represented 12 of those. 30 to 39 represented 5 of those warnings. 40 to 49 represented 5, and over 50 represented 5. Let's see here. The racial breakdown was 21 of those were issued to Caucasians, 6 to African Americans, and none of the other races were represented. In the initiation of contact, it looks like the majority of those were initiated by PPB by patrol. Let's see here. In terms of, there's no hot spots that really stand out. It looks like the 100 block of West Burnside had 3. Southwest 12th in Washington had a couple. Northwest 2nd in Gleason had a couple. And Northwest 5th in Davis had a couple. 2nd in Washington had a couple. 4th in Morrison had a couple. And then the rest of the locations were just one single written one.
Thank you for doing
Yeah,
that
no
for us. Did people have thoughts or questions?
Yeah, just one quick one. On Friday, I have been playing music, entertaining the lunch crowd sporadically but consistently for the whole summer. And I had an officer from the
Park Rangers?
yes, park rangers come up to me and dressed me down that I had been breaking some ordinance, or that I was aware of some ordinance. And I wasn't even aware that that the parks now were being so guarded by the park rangers as to run over art like a Soviet tank, because that's quote unquote exactly what I said to him. The other person who was with him, well, maybe we got off on the wrong foot, maybe we did. But I am just wondering, at what point do you silence the voice of the people, the music, the spectacle that is downtown Portland for the sake of public safety or the sake of, you know, some ordinance.
Hey buddy, I'm gonna put that on like a hold list, because I wanna
Well,
stay
I've been
focused.
going, yeah, I've been
I
going
know.
to these meetings for 2 years, and every time it seems like I come to these meetings, there's a big change up. And that's why I'm here. There's a change up in the rules, or there's
Okay.
a change in the game that I wasn't made aware of.
Right, so let's discuss that as soon as we're done getting any feedback on the statistics. I just wanna keep us focused.
Certainly.
Did someone else have, yeah, Carl?
Officer, what's the time frame of the data collection?
Oh, it's a month, it's August.
It's August?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're done in 1 month segments. Anything else on the statistics?
A question regarding, these were August statistics, and we're up into October. Just curious, are we still collecting info, and will that be forthcoming?
We are, but my staff person who does the compilation, which is quite time consuming, has been on vacation since September, so I don't have staff to bring that, so we will, what we have for for August. But yes, the data is still being collected. It's a matter of.
And we'll still have access here?
Yes.
Do any of them involve animals? I know one of the regulations that's covered is around dogs being off their leashes or too far away.
These are only sidewalk warning data. And I know there's been interactions around animals. I just don't know, I don't know what that is, statistically what that represents.
Do you know? Yeah, once Sarah puts it all together, we usually get to see what anything else that was related.
There have been dog missions that have been going on downtown with Oklahoma Animal Control, so that's tracked separately though, so we don't have those specific stats.
Do you know whether they were using the sidewalk management ordinance as part of their enforcement?
I think typically they are focusing on the animal control ordinances and citing for that and anything else that might come along at the time, but
So
not the sidewalk.
leashes and rabies shots, is that what they generally focus
Right.
on?
The dog missions are ranging anything from issuing field licenses to folks and then giving them a certain amount of time, all the way up to the far end of the other end, just taking the dog, depending upon aggression or rabies or lack of rabies shots, those kind of things.
Waiting for next.
What I would like to know is who gave the order to you to do what you were doing when I sat there and watched you and 4 police officers spend a total of 2 hours of police time in basically intimidating 3 homeless travelers that were sitting there, and I was witness to this whole thing, and I have it on film if you want to see
Wait,
it.
is this the same issue you brought up?
Yeah,
last
no,
time?
this
Okay.
is not the same. This
Will
is
you
a
give
new
us
and different
details?
issue. I've seen this happen, and I have it on film 5 different times since the last meeting here, that officers had come up and actually because most of it's a Portland Outdoor Store guy, because they're sitting there right around in there, what they're doing is they're using the sidewalk ordinance to enforce. I sat there and watched this guy take guy's dog get taken because his tag had fell off. And they took this guy's dog, and it cost them like $50 to get him out. You wonder about stuff like this when the PBA, the Portland Business Alliance, is using that when these people have no place to go. There is no place for them to go. Okay? So where are they supposed to go? You tell me this, and I will start working on getting them there. But until we have a place to put people, this sidewalk ordinance is being used as a bludgeon
Oh, okay,
by
let's see.
the business
Okay, let's go.
association.
I think we're gonna get a little bit of information about the instances you're talking about.
So I'm glad you brought that up because we have had ongoing complaints from businesses and people who work downtown who have been intimidated since the middle of August, essentially, by the gangs of summer travelers, primarily on 3rd Avenue. Every day we get complaints. There is an office building right at 3rd and Oak whose female employees won't even go out for lunch anymore because they are so intimidated by the aggressive panhandling, the aggressive dogs. And so, to me, the police are doing what they should. They're trying to establish a sense of safety. This group, I would argue, are not what we would think of as traditional homeless. They're homeless by choice. This is a lifestyle they choose. They could access services at transition projects, but Doreen Binder has said to some of them that they're not welcome because of the way they behave and the way their dogs interact, and they don't want to follow the rules. So I think it's a really tough population that's created tremendous livability problems in downtown Portland. And I don't know if anybody saw the KGW piece last week, which was a very good story about the impact that they're having by their behaviors, drinking, urinating, all the things that go along with that on the businesses in downtown and the people who work and try to use the sidewalks as well.
So what I'm hearing is it's aggressive panhandling and it's nuisance behaviors that are covered by other regulations, not by the sidewalk management ordinance.
Most of what they're doing would be considered free speech and aren't going to be violations of any ordinance. They're sitting in the furnishing zone in groups and spreading their garbage and everything out is not covered by the sidewalk ordinance. They're in the furnishing zone. So
They still have to have their stuff within arm's reach.
Which is open interpretation. They have a lot of items, they're all in their arm's reach. I have lots and lots of pictures of multiple bags and dogs and all sorts of, and needles and musical equipment and just garbage surrounding people. That's all within their arm's reach.
This isn't your regular homeless, this is like a band of marauders. It's aggressive, it's not just panhandling with, a musical instrument or a sign that says, please, help me today, or something like that. It is aggressive, name calling, that type of thing. It's not your typical, what we would consider a regular homeless person or a musical endeavor or something
Are you
like that.
talking about Third Avenue too? Are we talking about the same
Yeah,
situation?
we're talking about between Stark and Oak on
Okay.
Third.
Just wanted to
This is right there. It's just-
triangulate here.
It's just right there.
And is that what you're talking about too, Lee?
Yes. I'm talking about we cannot, I don't care, 60% of the people out here are mentally ill. Face it, that's what it is, okay? And a lot of those people don't fit into the niche of homelessness or whatever you want to consider a niche in homelessness. Homelessness goes all the way from the family that just got kicked out of their house because they were foreclosed, all the way down to, I know drunks down there that I've known since I've been here. And that's 40 years. So you take into consideration people like that. But the thing that I'm trying to get across is because of their dogs, there's no place to go. When 2 years ago when we first started this and everybody told me about the rack and they told me about this wonderful little courtyard that was going to be there where they'll have cages for dogs and plenty of room for everybody to sit down so they can get off the streets, well, that wasn't the fact. They've got 4 animals and 2 of those don't even work. And the enclosure is smaller than a quarter of this room, or smaller than this area right here. What we need is a full-size area, and that's part of what I brought today at no cost to the city that we'll take care of it. We can take care of these people. All we need to do is have a place to do it. And, the security, you wouldn't have people like that because then the police officers in Clean and Safe would be able to go, okay, you're not welcome here, but you are welcome here. Now there's not a place where people can go and hang out because that's what kids do. When I was 20 to 30, that's all we did was go hang out. That's all you really have to do. So unless we have a place for these people to go, and unless we have something that we can do and move forward with this, then we're going to have to quit.
No, I know.
So we have a
I know,
protocol
I'm
in
done.
City Hall that when the mayor or another commissioner shows up that we break what we're doing. So I'm gathering that the mayor urgently needs to speak to me.
So I apologize for interrupting. I have to see the emergency communications.
I'll be right back.
Hey, Sam.
Thank you for your service on this group.
So, when I think about, yeah, Mark, I'm just trying to think about how to organize what we're talking about because we're having some solutions thrown in and some problems and, did you?
So, the idea of having a place for people to go, I think is an important idea I want to talk about. I also think that we have to acknowledge that there are people who aren't going to go there, and some of the folks we're talking about may be those folks, that we're going to, even if we've got places for people to go, there are going to be people who choose not to go to those places, and if they're behaving in a way that is disruptive, homeless or not, there's got to be some level of ability to respond to that, right? You got to be able to respond to that and create some accountability around it. So I think, you raised the concern about seeing the police coming and engaging these folks, and the question is, what triggered that, right? If they got a call about some kind of behavior that was problematic, aggressive, and threatening, the police are gonna come, that's what we asked them to do, and they're gonna figure out how to resolve that. Now, I don't know the details of it, but I feel like we don't necessarily wanna collapse the, you don't wanna promise that if we had a place for people to go, these folks wouldn't be there anymore on this sidewalk. There's an argument to be made for more places for folks to go, and I would make it with you in terms of places for people to be with their animals and so forth. But it doesn't solve the issue that we're talking about here. What happens when someone says, I'm gonna sit here and not just sit here with my animal, but I'm gonna engage in behavior that's intimidating or threatening to people who walk by, homeless or not? Because I think that's the conversation, is how do we handle that situation, and is there something wrong with the way that the police are responding to those things right now? I'm not hearing, just them being there can't be the problem, right? Because that's what we ask them to do. So that's the hard one. I mean, I think that's where, and why we're all here together, is that there are situations like this, we ask the police to manage it if we're not able to manage it ourselves. And how does that happen?
The only thing I have to say about that is I've been here, and like I said, actually, we're putting together almost a 2-hour tape of this going on for the last 2 years on the sidewalk ordinance. And they use the sidewalk ordinance and they use the complaints to go. It's like the 3 gentlemen that were there, they gave the one guy a ticket for camping. It was a cold morning, even I had a jacket on. And it was a cold morning, and all he had his sleeping bag wrapped around, which is considered camping because that's part of it. Anything you pull over yourself and you'll put on is camping. But if we don't work together with the businesses and everybody else in there, because I wouldn't want them out in front of my business if they were going to act in that way. But if they're acting illegally, I'll arrest them. We used to call it catch and release down at the test site because they give you a ticket and let you go. And these kids, they never do it. They never go to court. They never do these kind of things. So we have to figure out a way to try to understand this. And there's no treatment on demand. You can't just go. Hooper is the only thing. I'm just saying, as long as we don't have the resources, and I know money's tight right now with everybody. It is even for me. But as long as we don't have the resources to do this, or we don't have a place to get them there, we're going to have this continuing problem that I've seen for 2 years.
So
why don't we just end this by having a place for them to go?
Wait, so I want to appreciate what Mark said about calling out folks who are not interested in, and other people have mentioned, folks that aren't interested in getting treatment or getting into housing and are aggressive, and it sounds like their behavior precludes everyone else from being able to use the public sidewalk, right? So can we just talk for a minute about, yeah.
Can I just be real clear though?
Yeah.
I wasn't saying that there are people who didn't want services or didn't want to get into housing, but there are people who are not going to go to a sort of
Traditional.
community center for homeless people. If that is their only option, they're going to go to a park, they're going to sit on the sidewalk because for whatever reason they don't want to be in that environment, which I can understand. So they may well want housing, I don't know in this particular, but it's sort of what's happening while they're still outside. And some folks will want to go to a communal setting, right, to Dream, a Dignity Village, a day space like Join, but there are going to be folks who just opt out of that. And, I think they're
Well,
going to
then
be
let me
outside.
ask you, Mark, because I heard a population talked about that folks that feel that there are people who, as a lifestyle choice, are travelers, who are, that's sort of the way they're living. They like to go in groups, and they live outside. That's part of what they're doing. Would you agree that there are folks that fit that demographic that are downtown?
I think there are some people who come to town and they're not really interested in staying long-term. They're not really interested in engaging in the traditional services. That population exists.
Right.
Who you were seeing at that particular moment on the sidewalk, I can't say. But I think what we know about them is that they were on the sidewalk, not trying to get into another facility they might go to. And so the question is, if that's the choice they're making, what are our expectations of them and ourselves in terms of how we relate to them?
Well, if it's okay, I'd love to get some perspective on what the police and things, what the options are, because, so you said someone was ticketed for camping, and, I'm not asking you to speak on a specific instance that you're unaware of, but let's get your perspective into this conversation.
Well, I've known Wade for a long time. He's passionate around the homeless issue. That's one of the things that I respect, because he is driven around this issue. The population that we're dealing with, and I've spent countless hours speaking with folks about where they're from and what their plans are. And the group that we're dealing with, we're getting the complaints on, the violent behavior, all those kind of things, don't really fall into the traditional homeless population of Portland. The folks who've been here for years and years and years, and they access services, and a lot of those folks want housing. And so this group doesn't really fall into any. It's like they kind of show up and ransack the city a little bit, and when the weather turns, they turn around and leave. And so it's I understand Wade's passion. I get it. It's not lost on me. Mark framed it in a way that's incredibly eloquent, and you really hit the nail on the head. This is not our traditional group, and at some point, we all have responsibility around this issue, including the folks who are here, and if their behaviors are impacting businesses and causing concerns for safety. That's all we're trying to, I try and stay in the middle of that issue, and I think if you go out and talk to these folks, that I haven't lost my compassion for what people go through. I've been doing this a long time. I have not lost my compassion for what folks deal with on a daily basis out here. That said, you still have to have some sort of behavioral constraints, so everybody feels safe. Not only the folks who are out there on the street, but folks who want to walk by down the street, or a ladder with 9 kids holding onto a rope that walk through, or whatever it is. Anybody should be able to go through particular areas without having to worry about their concerns. So I hope that I succinctly stated where the police come from, and it's a passionate issue on all sides, and I get that. I don't take offense to it. I just enjoy this debate, this lively debate, because I think somewhere we hopefully end up in the middle on something that works for everyone.
So we've heard, thank you very much for that. So we've heard that, a couple, to the solution of having some place for everyone to go, which we don't have at the moment, and I think this has been voiced here repeatedly, that that's a need. I'm wondering, so Ibrahim, if I can kind of come to you to ask, because you interact with a lot of folks. Have you had interactions with the young people who are hanging out at that area? Did you hear the area when you came in?
No, I didn't.
So it's on 3rd between Washington and Oak?
Yeah.
Between Oak and Stark. So it's aggressive panhandling, aggressive dogs. Do you have any, what's your experience of that?
I can, how much I can agree with Mark and Sergeant here on that. People traveling through, they do aggressive panhandling, and they even came back to me. I told them I was homeless too, and they said you can't do it. But and I think they get confused with people who can't tell the difference if they're from a different city, a different state, or people that stay here. And that's the thing that trying to distinguish: are they new on the streets? Are they new runaways? Are they from a different city or from a different state? And I think that's where the problems are driving, as you say, traditional homeless people. And I'm taking when you say traditional people that live in this city that's been homeless, not passing, people passing through. And yes, even coming here, I seen a bunch of them down on the street right there. And I thought about 2 years ago something was done about that aggressive panhandling.
I just want to say, I think we got bogged down in this one particular topic on having this meeting. I don't mean to.
Well, no, but because actually, we actually don't go into enough depth, I think, sometimes. My next question is, no, we really haven't. Well, I've been here for every meeting, and I have not heard us get really into detail about this. So one thing I'm wondering about is if this would be a good time to do some brainstorming or problem solving. you know, Wade, you say it seems a lot for the police, and if police are spending 2 hours with these folks, I'm sure many people feel that's not the best use of our police resource, and I'm wondering if people have heard of any more like community-driven, restorative kind of solutions to this?
I have a solution. Instead of looking at them as a hostile community, perhaps inviting them in more with the public access, kind of giving a small tax break to area businesses to allow them to sit down in a, like with tables and chairs such as this, where they don't have to buy anything, where maybe services come into them, where they can be kind of ingratiated into this system of welcome.
Okay, so
Just
let's
an idea.
throw that out. Other people, other ideas? I talked to somebody one time who talked, I don't know, Commissioner, if you talked to the folks that, I think it was like the process, some center, but they had done some work internationally with like pulling together some dialogue with young kind of traveler folks. I think it's hard too because it's a transient relationship, right? We don't have the same people every time. But I'm just wondering if anybody have any ideas for what interventions can keep everybody having access to the sidewalk.
Well, I think more tools around managing behavior and property in the furnishing zone would be helpful. When you see a group of 10 or 12 of them, they're in the furnishing zone right next to parking. And it's very difficult for people who want to park their vehicle and get out of their car and go pay at the meter. They're wading through dogs and garbage and luggage. And a number of people who park on the street downtown are disabled. And I can't imagine how difficult that would be to manage that. So I don't know around managing the volume of people who can gather and how much can be gathered in the zone, I think would be helpful in stopping that problem, as well as, just the fact that there's a large group that is aggressively panhandling really ups the intimidation level. I think for people, they just don't feel safe.
So the word vagrancy crosses my mind. Do we have laws against vagrancy, and what does that mean?
We don't anymore, do we?
No,
We don't have any laws against vagrancy. No, they all went away, I think going as far back as like the 60s, 70s.
They were held to be too vague, subject to discriminatory use.
Yeah.
Part of the reason a lot of people are in that furniture zone is that's the only place they're allowed to be at. And part of the ruling in the law was, don't sit next to the building or go out to that furnishing zone. So that is the spot, even though it's close to cars, close to where people are getting out of cars, close to the curb. Kind of a terrible place to really go and sit anyway, but that's the spot where we've picked, or the city has. The fact that, like Wade keeps bringing up, there's nowhere for anybody to go. If there was a place where people could go, somewhere where you could go, you get flushed out of under the bridges, flushed out of business doorsteps, you can stay in these little furnishings with no coverings, which seems inhumane in a way when you really think about it. But you can sit there in these furnishing zones, but we have other people who don't want to be inside and are just troublemakers sitting on the curb being rude to people. If the homeless people had somewhere to go, they wouldn't be in that zone. It would probably be maybe a few troublemakers sitting there throwing stuff or being rude.
Are folks allowed to hang out in the parks? During the day, I'm talking about daytime.
Not really. I mean, they do a lot of profiling, I gotta tell you.
There's no laws that say people can't stay in a park during the park open hours.
But I've been in parks over like the O'Brien Square, and I've seen them come up and hassle people who were like collecting cans or just like laying down on the pavement or doing something like that. They're selective about it. That's just my experience.
Isn't this what the day shelter was supposed to address?
Yeah, but isn't it full?
No,
It is full all the time.
no. I've talked specifically with Billy Plummer, who runs the day side, and he said they have never had to turn anybody away. They've never been at capacity.
Yeah, I mean,
They don't allow people in, they don't allow people in there that don't smell right. They don't allow people in there with their dogs. And some of these dogs are aggressive only because they have to be aggressive to survive. I don't know if I've been homeless, a few of us here have been homeless, so we know what it's like to live on those streets. I was a punk, a junk, and a drunk myself. My police record shows it. That was 30 years ago. Why do we not, in the last 30 years, have we not put in? Because I started looking at what Clean and Safe pays their, like just their armed officers, and there's like 12 of them. They're like 40 grand a year, plus benefits and everything. It's outrageous. You could put a lot of people in subsidized housing in this city for the price of just those guys, okay? You know, I understand the whole thing, but isn't that what the police department's for?
Okay, so wait, I want to get, Mark, you kind of were surprised when you heard Wade say because you don't smell right. Is that not your experience?
I would be surprised. I haven't heard anybody else say that, but I think the animals can be a challenge. You know, the animals can come in to join stay space. We don't turn anybody away either. We get full, and a very full environment with lots of folks sometimes can be a challenging place for people to be. But, you know, we'll let animals in as long as they stay friendly, and if they're not, we've got some kennels outside, and Outside Inn has their day space as well with some kennel facilities. And I don't want to say we've got enough. If everybody tomorrow decided they wanted to be in a day space, we would no way have enough capacity for that. But at least right now, if somebody wants to be off the street during the day, most days of the week, there's a place to go. But again, it's not nearly the capacity. And animals, I think, are a challenge. I mean, that is the case. I don't know what you guys' policy is.
And then there's also the issue that people who want to ask other people for money want to be in the places that other people are going past.
Yes.
They don't want to be that park or such places. Officers, do you get the sense it's the same individuals who are hanging out in that particular location the whole time?
You mean like at Third and Oak in those
Yeah.
particular areas that we're talking about? Yeah, we're having a lot of repeat contacts.
So it's a dozen or so particular individuals?
Yeah, probably even a little bit more than that.
The only problem I have is when I came past coming down, I was coming from my place over there, and I passed what I call the bench. And there was like, I don't know, 6 or 8 people there, and they were actually physically smoking crack. And I went down there and told the officers, hey, why don't 2 of you peel off and go up to the crack bench and bust those guys? Instead of all 4 of you sitting here blocking 1 lane of traffic, or they were there for the better part of 40 minutes each. And I'm just saying, that kind of, you know, I mean, what about the same guys that I see in front of the bus depot every day selling crack? I've got pictures of them if you want to know who they are. And I can actually give you film of them selling hand to hand. But we don't seem to be going after those people as hard as we are the punks and the drunks. I mean, that's what I'm saying. If we're going to have police, if police are going to protect and serve, that means protect and serve everybody, including the homeless. And if people, I mean, right there in front of the McDonald's Center, people are selling and smoking crack. I mean, how bad is that compared to a drunk on 3rd Avenue? I mean, that's the kind of behavior that we need to get the police in.
We have an entire street crime unit dedicated to the open-air drug dealing in downtown Portland.
I've seen the
have
same guys out
walk-ins,
there for
we
years.
have drug impact areas, we've done a lot towards that. But that's got nothing to do with addressing behavioral issues that are concerning to the citizens. That's what we're talking about here. And I would think we actually would be on the same page as this. Because these folks that we're dealing with, this is not the folks that you're normally out advocating for.
I know. That's why they need to be advocated for the most.
Or
Because if they're
there needs to
addicted,
be some sort of something that we all expect behaviorally from folks who are in our city. I mean, we all have responsibility here, Wade. It's not just everybody else's, they have responsibility too. And I think we're a lot closer on this issue than you may think we are.
we're very close on this issue, but because I came in some money because of my disability. I personally taken two of those gutter punks off the streets, got them into housing, and got them clean. And that's just in the last 6 months, okay? Now, if I can do that as a personal citizen, you know, it's the same thing I say with the religious-based communities. They have it in Seattle and down there. They have the 10 cities able to do it. We have car camping here now. What we need to do is allow the faith-based or his or my or any of the nonprofits to be able to take these people in and put them there as long as they keep them in a clean, safe environment. That's what I'm talking about,
Okay,
a
wait,
clean, safe
Okay,
environment.
wait, I just wanna make a distinction, because what I'm hearing is a difference between daytime and nighttime issues. So, because you're talking about people being able to be in church parking lots, right, in cars to
As
sleep.
far as camping, yeah.
Right, but what I'm hearing is most of this during the daytime that you're dealing with this harassment, kind of the aggressive panhandling?
Yeah, I mean, it's centered around when the largest numbers of people are out. So that's certainly, you know, that it's economically driven. There are issues at nights, but typically what we're talking about in here is daytime stuff.
Have you, in terms of the police bureau and others, has there been problem solving, Mike? I don't know if you've been involved as crime prevention. Have people, you know, have efforts been put into really focusing on some problem solving around this issue? A couple years ago, I do remember the aggressive handling was way up on people's concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we met with all the business owners. We constant communication with Clean and Safe and the police, and we've been reaching out to guys like Mike D with Right to Dream 2, and they've gone out there and talked to some of those groups. We just haven't been able to make any traction. The beginning of the summer, we had some pretty serious issues going from Burnside south. And so we were able to designate those areas as high pedestrian use areas, primarily because of the narrow sidewalks, and you had the big lines for Voodoo Donuts, a lot of the lines around the food carts, and it was just problematic from a variety of different issues. Since we've implemented those as high pedestrian use areas, we've essentially created a funnel in those 2 blocks on 3rd Avenue where they can sit there, and there is a lot of foot traffic, and they do get a considerable amount of money from panhandling. So that's why this issue has been so persistent. As soon as they're able to get a group out of there that is having huge impact for those businesses, threatening people, threatening the business owners, causing property damage, as soon as the police are able to get one group out and move along, another group comes right in. And it's an all-day activity. For me, and my standpoint in taking community complaints, it has been constant, more so than any other block I've dealt with this entire summer.
Mark, do you have?
Well, I mean, you asked sort of what are models for doing it, and what we're trying to do here is a little bit of a model, I think, in terms of recognizing the distinctions, right? So if someone is just being on the sidewalk, that isn't the issue. If someone is behaving in a way that is aggressive and disruptive, that we have to give public safety the opportunity to go and engage that and address it. And, at the same time, say it's, people shouldn't be getting tickets just for being on the sidewalk, and to draw those distinctions and to work with each other around it. I mean, as someone who runs a day space, if somebody comes into the day space and behaves like a jerk, I'm going to have to tell them to leave. And, and I think all of us, Right to Dream, can't have folks in there disrupting the community either. So that idea that whatever is going on for folks, at some level, in order for us to coexist, there's got to be some baseline. And it doesn't mean we can't provide services to them, or that we give up on them, or that we stop working with them. That's true of Joint too. If someone comes in and disrupts our day space, I ask them to leave. Doesn't mean I'm not going to work with them on a housing plan. But at that moment in time when they're causing that kind of a disruption with their behavior, I have to be able to intervene for the sake of preserving the community space for everybody else who's there. And I think that's what we're trying to do here too, right? Is say we may have to have the police come and engage that particular group of people while they're behaving this way. Doesn't mean that we're not going to try to extend services to them. Doesn't mean we're not going to try to keep connected. But in that moment in time, we've got to be okay with the police saying, okay, that's got to stop, and having the police do that. I think that's why we're here, right? Is trying to walk that line with folks. Well, it's not about their homelessness.
Another
it's about
situation is
Wait, because
I was just going to say, the fact of the matter is that statistically speaking, the majority of Portland's homeless population use the sidewalks responsibly, without issue. And so it really is a very small group that we're talking about here, but I think in large part, our homeless use our facilities and our services and the sidewalks and stuff that we all share very responsibly and without problems. So.
I know, I got kudos for the cops, for the police force, because they're allowing people to sleep in the little alcoves and stuff in Old Town and stuff now. I see that after 9 o'clock, 9 and 7, the Clean and Safe comes around and gets everybody up. I can understand that. But I've seen groups, or small groups, like 1 or 2 people sitting on a corner, spanging in downtown. And I was personally there when this one police officer who was a correctional police officer, who's a transit guy, came up and started giving these people a bad time and told them they couldn't sit there legally. And I said, excuse me, officer, but they are legal. And I pulled out my handy dandy sidewalk ordinance thing, and I said, it's perfectly legal. They're doing exactly what they're going to do. Please don't bother them anymore. And I mean, if they're in the sidewalk ordinance thing and they're not, I tell these kids the same thing. You can ask them, they'll tell you. I tell them, don't drink, don't do drugs right here. I said, if you're going to do that, go do it in the privacy, whatever house you got, because if you do it here, then it gives them a reason to arrest you and a reason for them to come and get there. But as long as all they're doing is sitting on the sidewalk and spanging, you know, like I said, 40 minutes each. 40 minutes was the total of police time.
Fair change.
Spanging is
Thank you.
sure, fair change. Well,
I'm glad I was.
I didn't know what bloody brilliant meant too until I went to England. But
Requesting all.
It's actually a compliment.
alms for the poor.
But
But I'm
wait,
just-
but let's make that distinction on the, 'cause I really want to make the distinction on what's aggressive, because
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I gotta jump in and say, I'm a woman, I work near there, and I see people all the time asking me for money. That's completely fine. But I have hit some groups where it really, I feel unsafe, and I'm not easily intimidated. But I don't think it's okay for me to feel like I cannot walk on a sidewalk because I'm gonna be, you know, harassed. That's what it feels like. It feels like being harassed. So I think that's the behavior thing. So I wanna make sure we're making that distinction. It's not just spanking. It's not just being on the sidewalk. It's a way of interacting and a certain set of behaviors that mean that other people cannot feel safe using the sidewalk.
Hey, I understand the same thing, but at times I don't feel safe on the sidewalks. I mean, it's like voodoo. I quit going on that side of the street. I can't walk, I can't get my cart down that side of the street. You know, I mean, I understand businesses and everything else. The problem that I have with, and this wasn't just that, clean and safe also, I remember they were sitting out front, I was talking to them, they were sitting on the side of actually a Portland Outdoor Store, and this clean and safe officer basically came up and told them that he was going to sit there until they moved. And we sat there for a good 40 minutes till the kids just said, screw this, got up, because they couldn't make any money with the cops sitting right in front of them. And they went up and moved to another place. But I'm just saying, the intimidation factor of that goes on
Swings both ways.
is too much.
Let's just go, I'd like to hear some more suggestions. Buddy suggested having benches in this particular area, but for this particular area, for this particular problem, does anybody have any suggestions, either regulatory or in practice, as to what might help?
I think the safety is in the numbers. If there's one or two people of the same credentials or the passing, I don't think people feel safe. I think it's the large amount. You know, when they see that large amount, all of a sudden that instant fear.
That's right. It's when it gets to be 6, 8,
And
12 of them.
Right, and it could be the same thing can happen with one or two people, but, and I think maybe it should be like the sidewalk where 4 people per block, maybe you can say, hey, y'all panhandle, y'all too big, and space out, something like that. And I think people feel more comfortable with less than with more.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the other big picture to keep in mind is everybody in this room benefits from a vibrant downtown area with successful businesses. And, you know, it's condensed, so we're always managing certain issues that pop up anytime you have high density, but everybody in this room, homeless advocates, the police, the businesses, everybody benefits from having a vibrant business. So the donations, you know, the downtown businesses donate to the homeless causes and stuff. And so I think, you know, in the big picture, kind of looking down at all this, it's really important to remember that we all have, we should all be keeping that portion of this in mind, which is we want the businesses to be successful too. And so it's, you know, I mean, you're a street musician, you're out here, there's people coming downtown, that helps you out when you're doing anything.
Yeah, like, exactly. I feel that, you know, I'm working with businesses. I'm there to enhance the area and to, when tourists come to Portland and say, oh, there was somebody who who's out there, making some music and, hustling and having their fun, and I'm not in competition with the businesses, and I just don't feel like sometimes there should be this us against them mentality of the businesses against the street life, because sometimes it works together, not always. Sometimes. It isn't just, there isn't just crack people out there and people shooting
And
needles
I
in
think
our
what
arms.
we're addressing is one of the times when it doesn't.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, I understand, we've been addressing that.
So Michael, let's go back to what Commissioner Fritz, I'm sorry. Oh, man, I know, but it's worse when it happens the other way. It really irritates him, sorry.
What I'm hearing is the tactic that I'm hearing described is specifically an intention to gang up and to intimidate. So there's more going on there in terms of breaking the law, isn't there? In terms of assault?
I don't know if some of us say
Or
something.
harassment?
It can turn into that, but if it doesn't, and it's just verbal, that's a freedom of speech issue. But it can turn into it if it gets physical.
Okay,
Have you
heard
had
it?
any instances in that location of actual citable illegal behavior, misdemeanors, whatever?
Yeah, in fact, Lori, you see the cases, but I'm sure we've had several cases.
Never to speak up, so we're being.
Yeah, we do. I don't, Lori
You know,
sees all the cases that come through Central.
I can't tell you precisely whether there's any cases at that location, but there are certainly cases every day where people are engaging in violent, threatening behavior by, doing physical gestures as well as maybe screaming threats. But those kind of cases come in every day from downtown Portland.
So that's a gang tactic is what I hear described over here of 6, 8, 12 people harassing all at the same time, one particular person.
Okay, so look, we're gonna throw that into the mix. You had something you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm actually a resident at Ranch 2, and I've panhandled a few times when I've had to, so I'd like to put it in perspective from somebody on the other side. Someone asked what the definition of aggressive panhandling was, and I don't know what the legal definition is, but for me and my husband, we feel that it's getting too aggressive. If it's more us two sitting there, that's not okay. And if we ask somebody once and they say no, it doesn't matter if it's the third, fourth, fifth time they walk down the sidewalk. We try to pay attention and don't ask that person again, because to us that's harassing behavior. And we're actually more the norm for that. There's a lot of, I have seen some people like over by 7-Eleven, they ask for you something of you coming out the store, you don't have it, they'll yell and scream and cuss at you, and they just, to me, they give other houseless people a bad name.
That's right, I mean, that's the minority of the population, it's the majority, they're just the most visible.
So it's actually in all of our interest in this room to figure some ways to address that, because it does reflect poorly on folks like yourself who are being gracious.
Is there anyone we
It's
haven't
always
heard
the
from
10%.
that wanted to throw their 2 cents in here? 3, 1.
Well, I'm really open. I appreciate the conversation, and I'm very much open. And I think we do need to figure out how to address this when it gets colder and rainier. It may resolve, but it's going to come back again. One of the issues that I'm not sure I did put on the agenda for today, we're having the regional housing forum next month. I don't know if the date is set to that. Do you know?
I don't. I heard something about November 19th, but I don't. Is
Oh,
that
yeah,
confirmed?
Yeah, I thought it was canceled until January because of the new elections. They had to go and redo something with the existing council people. Then, if by chance they change some of the folks on them, they can say we didn't agree to that.
Well, I'll check on that. Because I personally have an investment, having made a promise to Cameron as part of his resolving the strike, that we were going to have it in November.
Yeah, I'm
So
in contact.
regardless, we will have it. And so this seems like a topic that would be good for some more conversation particularly with folks who have been engaged in this and recognize that it's not easy. One of the things I wanted to check with us, since our last meeting, we had a resolution to the anti-camping ordinance that came through county council, and there's a list of protocols that the police have for when people will be not disturbed while sleeping and when they might be. Can you just summarize what those protocols are? No. Okay.
I can.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
And it's something that's actually been occurring well before this ruling came out, but really, for any camps right now, there are numerous, even more notifications than are required by the ruling, as far as postings and the number of times that officers go out and warn people that they're gonna come out and do a cleanup of the area at the camp area, giving people that have had amassed stuff plenty of time to get their stuff moved. The ruling also requires that we photograph and separate things that people say are valuable if they are unable to take them versus the stuff that they either don't want anymore. And then we get crews to come out and clean that stuff up. So that's pretty much the process.
And is there a regulation as far as how many people can be together in one place, or no?
I'd have to look at that.
Sorry to put you on the spot, and I should know the regulations too, but what I'm thinking of, where I was going with this, is that it's possible we could do something similar on the issue of freedom of speech as expressed by panhandling, to try to look at, is there a critical mass beyond which it becomes threatening and intimidating?
And I think in general, we've always tried to encourage smaller groups of camping. We find that when the groups get bigger, there tends to be a higher propensity for violence and issues.
Right.
The crime victims of crime within their own groups, and so we've always tried to encourage smaller sizes of the camping groups.
Right.
I remember a couple of years ago when I was doing some research, there was some other city that had that in one of their ordinances, was a numbers, that it was considered aggressive if it was a certain number of people. I think it might have been 3 or more or something.
So that might be something for us to discuss. Ibrahim, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. I think that's working well when you keep it at a small group, but when it's raining outside and you allow, let's say, 4 people, and then that 5th person comes, I want to get out the rain, they're not going to say you can't do it.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I think what you're talking about, trying to convince a small group. And another thing, when you do move people out from camping, and let's say I go look for work, or I'm going to the restroom, or go to something to eat, and I leave away with my stuff, he's not allowed to get my stuff, and a lot of people are losing it. There's significant value and stuff to them, like their medication, their IDs, and I wonder if you all can try to do something about the importance of those people, personal things. I mean, not the clothes, but we can always get clothes, but their medication and their birth certificate, IDs, they're taken.
In relation to freedom of speech, it does carry conditions. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And there are speech is as much a weapon, if we believe pen is mightier than the sword, as a firearm. Just because you have a firearm doesn't mean you can go around shooting. So when speech is used as a weapon, it can cross over a threshold where it's no longer the right of a person to use that speech as a weapon to endanger other people. So you can't just use, say, blanket statement, freedom of speech, I can say it.
That's true, and there certainly are laws that, that do have in them speech. But in general, the majority of laws look for physical behaviors to go along with speech. And when we talk about disorderly conduct, which is the most common charge that is used to deal with sidewalk or street misbehavior, I'll call it, okay? If they cross over the line and are using verbal threats and physical manifestations to support that, that's what the court is looking for. You can tell somebody that, I hate you and I think you should be dead. And that's considered by the court to be something that's not illegal under the disorderly conduct statute. The courts have said there has to be some physical manifestations with that behavior to go along with the verbal
Even in relation
aspects.
to domestic violence and psychological abuse?
Well, there, certainly that is an area where you'd have to say, you know, a lot of women's rights groups thinks that there are, you know, psychological verbal abuse of either a woman or a man in a domestic relationship. That alone is not criminal. It happens out there, and it's certainly very serious, but that is not in and of itself criminal.
So thank you for that conversation. We want to move to, Buddy, we wanted to hear your question as I heard it, was that that you had an encounter with a park ranger that was telling you there were ordinances that you were unaware of, and you were wondering if something had changed. Did I capture that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just, you know, sometimes ordinances are, you know, there's an ordinance against everything. I mean, quit straightening the road, is my point. We're Americans, we have a right to be crooked. And so what I do is I create spectacle. And when I go out there and play music, he told me I could play right on the sidewalk. That's fine, but that's away from the people who are having lunch and the tourists and whatnot. And so I would get a chance really to express myself and to, you know, and to give the show that I give to people.
So he said you couldn't play, where was this?
This was at O'Brien Square Park. At the corner of the park, there's a little spot, looks like a table. I put my keyboard down and play there. I use my own electricity. I've been doing that for 2 months. And he tells me, he goes in this little book. Well, I showed him, you know, the street musicians guide, and he kind of backed off from there. But, you know, I just felt really intimidated. I felt like, you know, this guy, I said, look, I don't take the bread out of your mouth, you know. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm playing music. It's not like I am panhandling. If people did give me something for my work, and they often do, it's because of the level of talent I've developed. They respect that. There's a difference between what I do and panhandling. And so if they don't understand this, they just look at this as simply noise, and they don't understand history. They don't understand the history of the United States.
So he came in and questioned whether it was all right for you to be there with your keyboard. When you showed him the musicians,
yeah, well, no,
then
but he was backing off after that point, and then he wanted me to, he wanted to ask my name, he wanted to give me a warning. I said, I'll just leave, you know, and I'll deal with it later. I took his card, I have his card, I wrote who he is. And I wrote him a letter, didn't get a response, and I wrote the person you told me to write, and I'm still waiting a response on that. Because, you know, just to clean out everything, anything that is, you know, supposedly, you know, what is it that you're trying to clean up the area or make sure that certain you know, you can't step on rights in order to protect rights, you know, because I can't explain it. I'm too emotionally involved.
Right. So, Buddy, let me ask a question. Mike, you may know the answer to this. The park rangers, that's kind of a new thing, right?
No, the park rangers being in downtown is a new thing, but the park rangers themselves is not.
No, I mean, I knew there'd been park rangers before. I mean, I Dudley do, right? No, he was a Mountie. Okay, but
Totally different.
But so, okay, what is the, you know, who are they? Who's in charge of them? And are these folks who have had training on the street musician agreement and perhaps the sidewalk ordinance?
Yeah, actually, the park rangers have been very well trained. Both Mark, myself, and a number of others really came to some of their training to try to give them an overall view of the complications and complexity of downtown. You know, that being said, everybody makes mistakes. I'm not sure what the particulars are with your case.
It's not really a case yet, we're just
or
kind of
situation, whatever it may be. But you know, I know Art from a work standpoint. Art Hendricks, who's in charge of the park rangers, is exceedingly busy. So having a long delay when you send Art an email is really not out of the ordinary. I'm sure Art will get back to you. For some reason, he doesn't. You're always welcome to get a hold of me too, and we can be another conduit for you.
I try to go through the proper channels. I'm trying to follow the rules, but, you know, this is what I do. This is my heart. This is who I am. You know,
And having the, you know, having
years,
the
I think.
handouts, both you with the musicians agreement and Wade with the sidewalk
Yes.
ordinance, you know, it's, you can then point to it and say, this
Yes.
is what the agreement is. So I think that's very helpful.
So it may have changed, but there used to be a very clear general prohibition on any kind of unpermitted solicitation in the parks. So you can't panhandle in the parks, is my understanding, even though you can do it on the sidewalks. You can't sell things, you can't, I mean, if you put your hat out, basically, I would imagine they would be reading that as soliciting absent a permit in the parks. Stuff you can do on the sidewalks, you can't, at least this is how the rules were 5 years ago.
You're the civil rights guy, you should know, right?
Right, I mean, I ran into this, and if there's a pretty, whether it's okay or not, that prohibition, I don't know, but that's what's in the ordinance books of the city, or at least it was. So that's probably why you're getting at, that the street musician agreement doesn't cover the parks.
And it might be something that we need to revisit now that we have more parks, we have more different kinds of parks, you know, directed parks is really
Well,
paved.
I'd be willing to get a
Yeah.
license if I have to. I mean, we've been
Right.
talking about this for 2 years now, and I'm still coming up against a new authority almost every time I go downtown. It's different.
Yeah, and somebody, I don't want you to miss that Mike said that he would be happy to help facilitate some resolution to your situation, because Art could be, Art's got a lot on his plate. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, thank you. And this has been a really good conversation. I'm really interested to hear from folks if you have suggestions on what should be in the regional housing summit whenever it happens. In particular, I'd like to hear from about the role of people living outside and formerly homeless folks as to how we want to be involved in that. What I envisioned a couple of months ago was a full-day session, some joint sessions and some breakouts. So I'm particularly interested in leading a session on women, the particular challenges of women living outside and what might be done about that. But clearly there's some issues that they're really beyond, there's some issues that are about sidewalk management and sharing public spaces, which is what the focus of this group has been. And then there's a lot of other issues which are really more about the bigger picture complexities. So we're almost running out of time today for having a brainstorming on that, but if you want to send me your suggestions, that would be good. I want to make sure before we move on that we have an update on A-boards and sidewalk cafes. Judith has been doing some information gathering about that, so if I could ask her to give you what she's learned.
Okay, now in my new job hat, we were exploring what some of the options are. So for a little bit of history in these conversations, the issue's been brought up that there doesn't seem to be a real mechanism for enforcing the sidewalk cafes and them staying in the area that they're supposed to be in. So I met with Rich Eisenhower from PBOT, and we had Mike Leisner from the Bureau of Developmental Services where inspections are. And it was really a helpful conversation because we were able, so like in 2009, PBOT came up with a plan. It's a very, it's a whole page of little bubbles with different people doing things. So a lot of it fell to the police to be part of the sort of eyes on the street so that they would report to PBOT. So since 2009, there's been no reports. They felt that's not a really good use of police resource. One thing PBOT had been struggling with was that they were under the impression that only the police could cite. So he and Mike Liefeld got into a long conversation about how actually, if you tie it to the property, there may be a way in which the property owner can be cited. They can then put that in their lease. So that they're going to look at all those complexities, and then ultimately it'd be a real opportunity to use parking enforcement. They're there, they're right there, they can notice these things, and they also have the capacity to take a picture and send it to whoever would be the folks who are doing it. But I explained that, one of the issues that's come up here is the concern that the sidewalk's available, particularly for people who might be using alternate mobility devices, but also the feeling that, the way in which the sidewalk ordinance is enforced toward people and not objects feels very uneven. I don't know where that came from. Ooh, uneven. So, and apparently I know that Rich this has kind of been on, he's been thinking about this, he knows this needs to be redone. I think this meeting sort of spurred some action on it, so that's where that was. Even
Wait.
Okay, wait.
I'm going to put out my perpetual complaint again.
Bye, Mark.
The thirsty line, I've complained about it for 2 years. That much space to get between their table and the tree, and that doesn't include the 12-inch paver that's in there.
No, okay, now here we go, because this was the other thing. Thank you for jogging my memory. Complaint, does that mean you call PBOT and make the complaint to PBOT?
I made it to him and gave him the video of it in person. I mean, is that good enough? I can show you video right here on my phone.
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing is those mechanisms are very complaint driven. So, and this also came up in terms from the Commission on Disability that's housed in our new office. And they're considering also how they can, there may be a gap between what Peabody thinks is going on the street because they just look at complaints versus what other people are experiencing. So I know that the Commission on Disability is starting to talk about maybe doing some kind of action where they really start to raise awareness around it. And
You just have these places with the real short sidewalks in Old Town. I mean, we all know how it is. And they don't go single, they go double wide on their tables. And as far, from what I can understand in the law, is that they're only supposed to have one table wide. And they've got 2 tables wide, they got them turned sideways, so there's like this much room, and my wheelchair is 32 inches wide.
wait, if you would send me an email about the Thirsty Lion, I will follow through with Rich.
It's not just them, it's
But do it for that one, and let's have that as the test case, because I agree that's a really annoying step.
This ordinance that we're talking about is a citywide
Yes.
cafe.
Yes.
Okay, Ibrahim, did you have something else?
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up. I know you're planning on putting, street cafes in places with parking lots at night, where the cars park.
Oh, that pilot project for the,
Yeah.
what are they called, street seating or street?
Yeah, and also, blocking off Old Town, Chinatown in an area so the party boys can walk the streets.
Proposed thing.
Yeah, proposal. Now, down from Mikey 3 and 2, it's hard to walk on that sidewalk, it's hard to, and these not the homeless population. It's entertainment population. And if you're trying to figure out how to contain a large crowd of people by attacking the houseless community, why can't you use that same thing and trying to solve the problem of entertainment? I mean, you make a provision where it's the whole downtown is their playground and they're breaking windows, expelling trash over it. Nothing's done as long as they're not killing each other. But when the houseless community do it, you know, I know you're in an oxymoronic position, but I mean, we all equal, right? The law, we all live under the same law.
Just to be clear, I don't support the parking lot spaces being, and that's done without council's assent. It's being done through transportation right now, and I quite have the same concerns. I'm gonna need a lot of convincing that the whole party area is gonna be.
So on that one, I get a weekly report of all the bar activity, all the problematic bars, anything that's an actual case. And I've had a few of them on there where they've actually involved residents at Right to Dream 2. They've been assaulted by some of the intoxicated patrons. And I think your group does an outstanding job of dealing with some extremely challenging situations and not escalating the situation. So actually the reason why Mike was here, he had to take off earlier, is him and I were meeting today to talk about how to actually have a meeting at R2D2 to solicit feedback on this proposal for what's going on there. So, it is a proposal. We're in the stages where we need the feedback from the community if it's going to move forward. But it's definitely not lost on us that, your residents are there and we need to know what's going on in this conversation.
Yeah, we'd like to be very involved. Thank you. So there's a couple other things that I just want to mention. I'm going to stand up now because I'm going to give a presentation. One of the most urgent things that I'm dealing with right now is helping people who have mental illnesses or experiencing mental illnesses, because the Department of Justice last month came out with a ruling that we have been unconstitutional in the police's actions towards people experiencing mental illnesses. So we being the council, has to come up with a plan to address that issue by October 12th, which is Friday. So that was one of the things I was talking about with the mayor, and I appreciate your allowing me to take a couple of minutes with him. My area of expertise is in mental health nursing. I worked at OHSU for 22 years and elsewhere in psychiatry before that. So I'm not as much involved so that's my piece that I'm taking ownership of, and it's challenging. I want to state up front, as Leo Rhodes and others have reminded me, there is somehow a perception that everybody who lives outside has mental illness problems or has drug addiction problems or alcohol problems. We all know that's not the case. So that's something that I am cognizant of moving forward is that whenever I'm talking about this, I want to make sure that people know I understand that point. One of the things we've done already is to have a new number that people can call if they're having a mental health crisis or if they're worried about somebody who has, instead of calling 911. Yes, grab your pens and pencils. I would like this, we need to get this number out, and it's actually easy to remember, even I can remember it. It's 503-97-23456. So if you remember it like that instead of the usual 972-3456, it's
Say that again.
503-97-23456. And that number will get you 24/7, 365. It will get you to mental health professionals and volunteers at Lines for Life, which was formerly known as Oregon Partnership. They are folks who can spend an hour on the phone talking somebody through a crisis, and they dealt with 19,000 calls last year. 98% of them were dealt with on the phone without having to dispatch anybody else. So they're outstanding at what they do, and we and business owners and others get that number out there, because we did it, we changed it a couple of weeks ago, announced it a couple of weeks ago, and we haven't gotten that much publicity for it. So you never know when somebody you know or somebody whose family member or loved one is in crisis, and that's, so if you publicize the number early and often, help me with that, because we want to make sure that people get the help that they need. Part of what I'm also doing is working with the mayor and the hospitals to figure out how do we plug the gaps in the healthcare system, both the physical healthcare system and the mental healthcare system. There's a huge opportunity right now with the governor's initiative on healthcare and managed care and looking at coordination between all of the hospitals and the care providers. What a concept if we added mental health as a legitimate medical condition and deal with that at the same time. So that's what I'm putting a lot of my efforts into right now, and I just wanted to let you know that. It's clearly, if we could actually provide services and as well as training and accountability and all the other pieces of the system, you start by helping people, then you don't get into some of these challenges. With healthcare, it's actually the fact that if we could make the system work, it would be less expensive. Whereas some of the other issues like houselessness, it's going to take a change in federal government policy to be able to to get the funding stream back that we used to have. So I just wanted to mention those things. Also, the voter registration deadline is October 16th. So if you know anybody who hasn't yet registered to vote, clearly at the federal level, it's hugely important who gets elected. I happen to think some of our local races are fairly important too, but that's another topic.
More important.
What's that?
They're more important at the local level.
In some ways they are, and I am passionately devoted to this issue, and I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for participating in these conversations. They're not easy conversations, and you have hung in there, kept coming back, and I think we've gotten to an understanding, as we heard today, that there are a lot of points of view that are valid in this whole conundrum of how do we manage our public spaces, and so I thank absolutely everyone.
And then could you just speak briefly about the vagaries in terms of mental health issues? How where do you set a boundary with someone who is just crying and is having an emotional thing, or actually, having an emotional breakdown?
Just somebody that you meet on the street who's...
When you say, using a lifeline, a crisis hotline, or encountering someone, how do you even begin to deal with that vague line between an immediate breakdown and I don't know, quite know how to even say it. You probably understand more professionally how to put it into words, but what I'm trying to say about an emotional crisis versus a mental health issue.
Well, mostly, there isn't a bright line. So mostly what we're trying to do is to provide options for folks and to let them know that this new number is a place that they can call. They can call if they're worried about somebody close by. In Oregon, our laws are such that you have to be a danger to yourself or others before the police can take you into custody on a mental health hold. So that presents some challenges in that that is a failure.
A physical danger.
Yes. And So not behaving in a quote normal manner is not considered a danger to self by others. So if a person is wandering into the street and yelling in the middle of the street, that could be taken as danger to self or others. And you can, under those conditions, you would call 911. We're working on rearranging our response or augmenting our response. We currently have one car that's a police officer and a mental health care worker together. It's just one shift, 5 days a week. So as part of the Department of Justice settlement, we're going to be changing that to 2 cars 24/7. That's an example of how we'll be reorganizing our internal system so that there's more responsible folks.
So what we're trying to do is provide a better avenue to the assessment of whether someone is truly having a mental health issue as opposed to having just smoked a really bad bowl of crack.
Right. And also getting more help earlier so that there is more opportunity to get into services, to get medications, to have folks check up on you if you've been in the hospital and have gone back to your apartment. If you don't have access to your medications and you're feeling all alone, that you're probably not going to do so well. That's another thing that Lions for Life does really well is they'll send a postcard a month later saying, hope things are going well for you. If not, give us a call again. We'd be glad to hear from you. So sometimes, and they've done actually a study on that and found that that greatly improves outcomes for folks. Just hearing that somebody cares and remembered that the person might be having a hard time a few weeks later. So some of this is not rocket science. It's what I think we can do really well as a compassionate community, which I hear every time I come to this meeting, is that there's a lot of people who really want to find solutions that work for everybody rather than lock them up, lock them away, make it disappear. That's not what I've heard from this group. So I know that's not what the police attitude is. It's not what any comments of anybody who's here is. So wanted to thank you for that. I especially will be waiting to see what happens 4 weeks and 1 day and 4 hours from tonight, not counting, before deciding what should happen with this group. If I'm still here next year, I will of course remain passionately committed to this and fixing the healthcare system, fixing services for people with mental illnesses, because that system has been broken for 30 years since we closed Danish and since the deinstitutionalization without proper community care. So although I would like to be able to promise I could fix it in 4 weeks, I want to try to I'm hoping I could help get it fixed in another 4 years. So as to how you can continue engaging and how we as a group want to use this forum, if we want to continue meeting together, it's amazing to me that every time we meet, there is something like this issue with Oak and Third that we need to puzzle through together. So I appreciate that, but we'll have the housing summit at some point, hopefully November. I'm going to check into that, so always learn something, as well as what was the asking for change word?
Spanging.
I learn something every time I'm here. I just wanted to put some closure to my part pre-November 6th by saying thank you so much, and I'll be back.
Thank you.